I've adjusted the way in which I edit using the creative masks in Lightroom, and so I'm going to run through now how I would approach editing an image like this one. So as you can see here, we have an Air France A350 that was taken off from SeaTac. The sky is quite light, the aircraft's quite deeply shadowed, so just normal adjustments in camera raw would not do enough to deal with the different foreground and background, so I need to separate the two of them out. So first of all, I'm going to start out in the layers mask and I'm going to click subject. So this will do a pretty reasonable job of selecting the aircraft, but it hasn't done a great job. First of all, it just misses some spaces. Other times you'll see that the edge selection is a bit crappy. And what I would normally have done is gone through and refined this and then separated out the background. But what we'll do here is take another step forward, and you'll see why I've chosen to do that as we go forward. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in, and I'm actually going to zoom into 300% so I get a really good understanding of what's going on. And I'm going to add a brush. I'll leave auto mask on for now, and I'm just going to sort of bring the details of this edge to a little bit of a sharper edge area. And once I've done a little bit of this line, I'm then going to select subtract brush. Now what you can probably see here is I've got a lot of speckles around the outside. So I have the overlay set to the color of the mask and then everything else black and white. It just helps to bring a little bit more contrast in. So here I'm going to just go around the edge, and again auto mask is selected, so it shouldn't take out anything of the aircraft that I actually want selected, and I'll take away some of these speckles from the edge. So I tend to start at something like the nose or the fin, just so I know how far I've gone round. Don't want to be working on areas more than once. Now here starts to see a bit more of a difficult area where we've got the lettering on the livery. The auto mask struggles to cope with that, so you can work your way up in certain areas. Hopefully you'll get it a little bit better, but there may be some bits that we will need to refine without the auto mask being selected. But we'll have a go at some of these first, see how we get on, and then we will make any final refinements when we need to. But so far it's actually not doing too bad a job. When we come back through another pass later on, you'll see how to improve that. Here you see the mask has gone off to one side, so Alt key, and it turns the brush to the opposite, so you can now just remove some of the bits that popped up there by accident. So now back into an area where we've got speckles, so I'll remove those again. If anyone from Adobe is watching, I'd love to know why it is that all these AI tools still seem to just like to have blurry edges to them. But so what we will find in some areas, and it hasn't done it too much yet, but we might come across this as we go around, is that you end up with some interesting edges where there are some quite peaky highlights, and in those I often find it's best to overpaint with a mask and then bring it back again afterwards. So we'll see if that's needed as we go around, but so far it seems to be behaving itself pretty well. There we go, we've got a little fraying over the edge, so hold Alt, change it to remove, and take that back. That's a good tool to remember, because when you start duplicating and inverting masks, as we're going to do later, you do start to get some effects where you can't understand why the brush isn't working anymore. And it could be that you've got something from the original brush tool that's been inverted rather than from the current brush tool, and the result can be that nothing happens. So just keep in mind that if you're brushing repeatedly and nothing's happening, you might have a higher priority mask that's making a difference. So we've got a bit of a weak edge there, so I'm going to go out to the brush. I'm going to take auto mask off, and I'm going to really make it a lot smaller, and I'm just going to click at the beginning, hold shift, click at the end, and we just get a nicer hard edge there. That's not caring, it won't try doing anything clever with the mask. Actually, while I've got that, I'll fill in a couple of gaps up here that look a little weak. But here we're just doing pure brushing, and the nice thing is when you're doing the pure brushing, the whole sort of processing element is a lot easier for the computer to deal with, so you don't get as much lag as you would when you were playing with the auto mask, which is requiring a little bit more processing power out of the computer. So there we go, deal with those things, and back to auto mask. Size it up again. You might look at this and you think, oh, it's already selected it, but sometimes it's just a little weak on the selection. In the same way we get the speckles around the outside, you'll find that it has just not done a full selection on the item that you want itself, so it's worth just doing a run round. Okay, here clearly it just didn't pay much attention to the nacelle. Again, it's a bit of a soft edge, which might explain why it had a hard time with it. So a little bit of over brushing, and then come back with the Alt key pressed to take it away again. Actually, that's not done too badly, so I'll just again use the subtract brush to clean up the edge. The Alt is great for taking stuff away that you've brushed in, but when you want to delete something, you want to use the subtract brush. So here again, see, it looks okay, but as you brush over the slats here, you start to see the colour of the mask becomes a lot more solid, and so you can see that it wasn't fully selected. Now you might be feeling that this is working quite well, but when we come to a later stage, you'll see that there's still not a perfect outcome. So this is why I've now started to do an extra step in this process. But fortunately, the extra step, whilst being very effective, is actually not terribly long to do. So work our way along the slat, using the brush to add in, and then the subtract brush to take away the speckles around the outside. And more speckle removing, more filling in. And bear in mind that when we're looking at this, we're looking at 300% view, so we're not actually seeing stuff that most people would normally see at all. So here it doesn't know what to do with the sort of the metallic leading edge of the winglet, so overpaint, take too much. This is what I was mentioning earlier, and then back it off afterwards with the Alt key, and that way you get the sort of the full coverage on the winglet, which the auto mask really struggles to deal with. It's always looking at differences from everything that's around it. I think I may have removed too much. Then there's a bit of a shadow, so Alt key on the subtract brush adds back in. So exactly the same effect, but just reversed. So now we'll work our way along the bottom here. Probably need to do a little bit of fill on that edge, but it's not very obvious. Okay, subtract brush, clean up here. This is where auto masking can sometimes work really nicely as we get into these little gaps. Not bad, but not perfect. So now you can see some little black edges have come in, taken too much out. So Alt key, and just use the feathered edge to fill those back in. And now it's looking a lot cleaner. While we're at it, take the speckles along here. And here you see we get to a point where flap track fairing hadn't been selected, so we'll go back to add. But you can see here it's quite a vague edge, so overbrush, and then with the Alt key just take it away. One of the things I often do wrong when doing this, and try not to be as bad at this as I am, and I've taken too much there, is I keep on brushing at one go, everything's going really nicely, and then you balls it up. And what you then find is that you can't just undo without taking away all the good stuff. So remember to take your finger off the button on your mouse every once in a while, just to make sure that you don't have everything lost if you make a mistake. You'll see I'm changing the size of the brush on a regular basis, just using the mouse key to do that. Bear in mind that the size of the brush, if you're using it normally, doesn't reflect the size if you use the Alt version. So when I hit Alt, you see it changes. So if I want to make that bigger or smaller, I have to do it whilst Alt is selected. So not a big deal, but just a little thing to bear in mind. So let's keep filling in as we go around here. This sort of livery where you've got the stripes, so it starts to select from different areas, can really mess things up a little bit, because suddenly it sees a dark bit and it assumes that everything nearby is really close, and so it starts to select the background. So just got to be a little careful with the selections there, but we'll get it back round. Again, this is sometimes a time when taking the auto mask off really helps. Go for a very small brush, select one corner, and then jump down to a nice solid area down here. There we go, we get a nice sharp edge to that one. I'll put the mask back on before I forget. If you're wondering how I'm moving around, I'm always holding the spacebar down to drag around. You can see as we get through here that a lot of this area has not been selected, and you might not notice that. You might see it looking pink and you think, okay, it's done a pretty decent job, but actually it isn't. So you've got to make sure that selection is good. What we will do later on will show us if we've missed that, so it's not the end of the world, but something to be mindful of. Bottom corner here, where it transitions from dark to light, again going to be tricky, so we'll go to a small brush, select the bottom, and then go up to here. Gives us a nice edge, and then we can keep filling in to get that all taken care of. So now we're going to tidy up the outside of this where there are some speckles, and then we need to deal with the inside. This one will probably be tricky because it's a very similar colour and brightness down in this corner, and so it might not know what's what. So here we find there's this internal section. So again, auto masking is your friend here, but it struggles to work out what's what. So here we go, this bit's actually sky. So we need to make sure that that is not selected, because otherwise it's going to get treated very differently to the rest of the sky when we start to use adjustments on our layers. Again, use Alt to recover some of those bits that it struggled with. Bring those back in because we want that to be selected, and make sure that the flap tracker bearings. Okay, so now we'll go around the edges here, and again we've got a fairing here that is not selected, and you look at that and I'm still not entirely sure I can tell where the edge of that fairing is, so no wonder it's had a hard time with it if I can't see it and I know what I'm looking at, and it has no idea what it's looking at. So we'll select through here. Sometimes through areas like this you've got engine exhaust which blurs everything up, which doesn't help, but we have to just make sure we do as good a job as we can. Right, tidy up those edges, a little bit there, a little bit there. This will probably be a tough one because we've got a little bit of sky through the gap there, so we'll go in and then we'll fill back. Far easier than trying to work around it. Okay, where is the fuselage in this space here? It's really hard to tell. So I'm going to have to make a bit of a guess, a bit of an educated guess, or maybe a not very educated guess. But I'm going to say it's around about here and around about here, and we'll see if I've got it wrong in a while, but it'll be hard to tell for a while, so we may have to fix this later on. I may have chosen a really bad example, so but you know, sometimes playing with the hard ones is a good lesson rather than making it too simple for us. Okay, doesn't look too bad. Let's just come and tidy up some edges around here. Okay, so now we've tidied up that section, let's just made too much of a selection there, so Alt key to bring that back out again. The edges don't seem to have been selected properly, so time to overdo it and then pull back. Trying to get Auto Mask to learn that would be a slow process. And when I say slow, I mean it might never actually do it. Okay, here we're going to just select, Auto Mask is not on, that was a mistake. I'm going to select all the way, it's a dead straight line along this, so if I just go from one end to the other, it will clean up all of it in one go. Okay. Too bad. Same thing, straight edge, so I'll just go start, end, and with a shift and click, clean up around the edge. Auto Mask almost gets it, but again, just a little bit of recovery. Again, if you're from Adobe and you're watching this, I'd love to know why it needs help there. Again, just go around cleaning up and also using the brush to just strengthen that edge a little bit. When we get to sections like this, the question you start finding is, you know, okay, what is background and what isn't? So that, I think, is a hole. So we'll go through and make sure that that's clear. At least this side. Some of the flat track fairings have been a little better, but still a little bit of pink in that gap there. Okay, just reinforce those edges a little bit. Reinforce here. There, it got it completely failed. So fill that in. Back to cleaning the edges up. The good news is that when it hasn't done a section, you know that there's a lot less going to be speckled around the edge, because if it didn't spot the main bit, it's certainly not going to add any to the sky. So recover that one as well. And then clean up. And we're making good progress now. Slightly bigger gap, so easier to work with. Okay, I'll add a bit. So again, because I've got the metal leading edge up there, it didn't want to select. So let's paint that all in and then take that away before I start using the subtract brush to take these edges off. It's kind of interesting. Ooh, too much. Add it back. Those are the sort of moments when you wish, like I said earlier, take your finger off the button a lot, and then a quick undo would have been a lot easier than fixing it, but don't always listen to my own advice. Okay, all the way up to the edge, clean that. Yeah, it's surprising how much that hasn't selected on that leading edge. Fills in quite a bit with the mask when you start to paint around it. Let's just go around this one before I go too far. Don't want to lose track of what I've done and what I haven't done. Okay, again the nacelle just got ignored. Let's paint that in. Took my finger off the button there just to make sure, because the first bit had worked quite nicely and I didn't want to lose all of that. And the streak, and then take some back because that edge was a little bit too much. And then just check with the subtract brush that there was nothing already there. And doing okay. But this bit, for some reason, just not selected. No idea why. Again, reinforce that edge. You might just see the colour of the mask filling in nicely. Okay, just gonna, because it's a nice straight edge, I'll start up bottom here and then move up to the top here, shift and click, do a whole bit in one go. And then the same thing for the subtract brush. Shift and click, clean up a long straight edge in one go. Door's closing, so we just need to clean this gap up here. Not bad, but again the edge gets pulled. And there we go. Around the nose gear door, and that's always a nice sign because we know we started at the nose, so we know we're getting close to finishing. So there we go, we're back at the nose, just check a little bit about some of those edges. Okay, so we're done. Now, normally, or previously, what I would have done is I would have, at this point, I'll zoom back out, I would go to duplicate and invert the mask, and I'd get the sky. Now, as we zoom in on this, we start to see the bits that haven't worked well, so we can see where pink is. So now what we're going to do, the brushes are reversed, but what we need to do is add more in to this mask, because inverted the mask, it actually inverts what's the subtract versus the addition. So let's go to the add. Oops, let's not go to the add. Let's go to the subtract and start to remove where we see pink. And you can see some edges now which we really couldn't tell before were there. But see, there's pink across this flap track fairing. There is pink all over this fin in places where the mask never was. And you realise that just how much was not obvious when we were doing the selection. It looked like we had it, but we didn't. So I'm going to go to, let's take the mask off, auto mask off, and just do from one end to the other. Okay, but not great. Missed a few bits, but I mentioned earlier on that this could sometimes be the result of the other tool. So if we go to Alt, assign, take that down, again auto mask off, click there, shift click up here, and that's taken some more out, so clearly that was part of the other mask. So when you see bits that you can't get rid of very easily, that might be the reason why. So we'll play around here. Yeah, there we go. Start to see it again on this section. I'm going to put auto mask back on for a second. Maybe it's a touch bigger. See if that, yeah, there we go. Pulling it in off there. Yes, that's making a big difference. Oops, ignore that, that was me being stupid. See, that doesn't work down here, so we've got to go back to the undo, the remove brush. There we go. Starting to get some good results. Still some little bits of pink though, and you think to yourself, how on earth did that bit in the middle there not get selected? But clearly something about the way in which we did the mask at the time didn't do the trick. Let's also look at all of this pink here in this dark section. How do we make sure that that all doesn't come in? So again, I'm still not sure why that bit's there, so let's try the other brush and find out if that is the reason. There we go. That's it. That's what's causing us the trouble. I run down here and we get a far better selection. So that was it. While I'm at it, I still see a tiny trace of pink there. Good, got it. Okay, let's run around this gap in the meantime. So look at this, see all these speckles? So let's see if we can remove those easily. The answer is, yeah, not too bad. So that bit of the fuselage would have been not masked properly. So take some of that out, that's good. Also some bits up here, let's see the edge of that section, lots of bleed across of the mask onto the flap, which would create a really weird edge effect. Not going away properly on all of that, so I'm going to finish trying these bits and then I shall go back to this brush and oh, there we go. And that's it again. They were the result of the different brush being used. So does this clean them up? Yes. Big effect. Go back to that bit there. That's the other brush. Okay, got that gap cleaned up. Let's look over here at the tailplane. Look at this, it's very pink. So we run across here. Oh, the auto mask is now working out so well for us. Bring that leading edge in. That one doesn't want to play ball, so is it the other brush? There it is, it's the other brush again. Golly. It's strange how the two of them can play into it. Okay, again lots of masking on the underside of this edge. Look at that, it's amazing how much of it's bled across. So do that, but clean. Little bits of pink in there too. Where did they come from? Who knows? Also, the AI masking tools are a world unto themselves sometimes. Come across the edge here again. Lots of bits of pink. Just go around and tidy all of that up. Didn't show itself when we were working it before, but now we've inverted everything. Suddenly all of this pink bleed over is really obvious. But because it's really obvious, it's a lot easier to deal with. So in these shaded areas here, some of these bits around the bottom they're going to be so inconspicuous in the final edit, you might not worry about it too much. But you know, while you're here, you can tidy it up. So that's looking better. A little bit still on the edges here, so you can just tidy those edges up. Thought we'd got the fairing done properly last time, but clearly hadn't got anything close to getting it done. So you really do see the errors here. What I used to do is I would invert it, see where there were pink bits, then go back to the old mask and try and fix them. And I would be going backwards and forwards for ages. And then I realised that the best bet was actually to re-edit them all in this inverted mask, and I can just keep working at it all the way around. It's a lot quicker, it's a lot easier to see where the errors are, because for the same reason I'd got them wrong before, when you're trying to work on them you think you know where it is, but you can still miss it. So this is just a far more effective way of doing it. So look at that leading edge is still not even close. Thought I'd done a really good job on that one and did it before. Shows what I know. There we go. Okay, this leading edge has got some pink on it. Let's see if we can tidy that up a little bit. Little bits here and there. That's better. Yeah, bit of pink on the leading edge of the nacelle there. Didn't know that was there. Again, look at it. So much of it you just don't notice in the first version. Even on the inside of the shadow there, it's masked. What an amazing amount of detail is lost to you when you're first playing with this. Actually, I'm quite happy with how I did on the nacelle, but look at this little area down here, pink there. Why? Why was that there? But we can tidy it up. Area under the fuselage, again, little bits of pink bleeding into the fuselage. Just get a sharper edge. Some of the highlights there. There we go. Look at that just disappear. And then you look at this door edge and you think, why is that all pink? That would look very strange in the edit afterwards. So Auto Mask actually does a pretty nice job. The nose is not bad at all. I'm actually quite happy with how that came out. Let's come back around the top. Little bits of pink up here. Okay, now we get to the logo. Now, of course, this is where I didn't do what I said I should have done earlier, which is start in one place that I know. Because now we're into the livery, and there's bits of pink all over the place, and I can't now remember where I started from. I have a feeling it was near the fin. So, if you were paying attention better than I was, you might be able to tell me that's what it was. But so here we go, lots of little pink areas around the lettering. Can we do these without upsetting the edges too much? Not going too badly. As I said, I should have probably chosen an easier example to do, but we did use some unmasked auto mask off a little bit when we did some of this before, so that might explain why we actually didn't have so many problems here. But there's still a few. Still see a few bits and pieces here that aren't right. Every time you switch brush, by the way, if you've got auto mask on or off, the selection changes. So don't think because you switched it in one place that it's now switched in all of them. It hasn't. Which you also have to remember when you turned it off and you think it's on. So there we go, tidying up these edges a little bit. This is not bad. Let's put that on. Let's go back to this brush, see was this the one. Turn auto mask off again, see if that makes a difference along here. Yep, seems to help. Little pink bits. Look at that window was selected pink. Why? Why? And then across the leading edge here, little bits of pink there as well. And you think, how did that happen? A little bit of a straight line here, probably inside where we did an edge, and that tidied it up a bit. Okay, let's put that auto mask on before I forget. Okay, across the edge there. Same thing here. We've got nacelle edges where it's clearly bled over. Tidy those up. And down here, I don't know why that bit gets selected, but you'd never notice that when you were doing the mask. You're always playing around the edges looking for the important bits there. You'd never think that a section down here would be in any way relevant. So there we go. Let's clean up along the edge there. Quite a bit of pink up in some of these pieces, so they clean up well. Amazing how much that's not been selected properly in the past. Leading edge again, I thought we'd done a good job on that before, but apparently not. So let's overpaint and then pull back on the edge. That looks better. Back at the side, here is again more selected than you would expect. Wow, amazing, absolutely amazing how much of that needed to be recovered. Fantastic example of why we do what we do. Okay, let's come along back end of the flaps, and again we see here quite a lot of over selection, and we can clean all of that up. And then we're back in here again, little patches all over the place. Just tidy up the edges. Underside of the flaps here, still bits of pink all over the place there. And now we're back to the fin, which was where we were before. Okay, I think we've done a good job there, so let's zoom back out. So now, not seeing any obvious pink here, and now I do what I did before, duplicate and invert the mask. So now I've got a new mask selecting the aircraft. Go to the original aircraft one, and I shall delete that. And now, what do we do? So the sky, okay, let's just do some basic edits so you can see the final effect without being too worried about the details. Pull the sky down a little bit, get a little bit of the detail back in there. It was a darker evening, bit of sky, the clouds in the sky there. We can maybe widen those up a touch, pull the highlights back as well, and then select the aircraft. Now we don't want to push the too high because the top is already getting quite a bit of light. So we'll just nudge the exposure up a touch, but we will bring the shadows up significantly, which will now make the whites a little bit too much. So I'll contradict that with a little bit of highlight, so we balance a bit of shadow in, a bit of highlight out. Maybe warm it a touch because it was actually in sunset, so we're just going to nudge the warmth up a little bit there, whereas in the background we might actually cool it a touch. We might bring that a bit more blue. Maybe that's not too bad. I thought I might have overdone that, but maybe it's not too bad. So there we go, we got a little bit of detail in there, maybe just a hint of the texture in the plane just to bolster it a little bit. And then just bring the cropping tool in a bit, clear out the background. bring this to more of a final version of the image, just like tweak on the rotation, and there we go. And that, I think, is a significant improvement from the original. So there we go. Hope that was helpful to you, and go and see what you can do, play with the mask yourself. Thanks very much. Bye.